computer because my daughter had a play date with another 3.5-year-old today. So apparently they found my computer and thought it was really fun to pick out the keys. So many of you people who are joining here, not all, but many of you may have children or thinking about moving to the suburbs. So this is a wonderful segue into Beyond Brooklyn. We help people from all walks of life who are interested in exploring what are their options, whether it be here in Brooklyn or beyond Brooklyn. Jessica, I'll let you do the official intro, but I will continue to stare angrily at my missing keypad.
So welcome everybody. It's about 5 after, so we'll get going here. Thank you for joining us. We have been running Beyond Brooklyn for about 7 years now. Started because I noticed that my friends and colleagues and clients couldn't figure out where to move, but they had been priced out of, in my case, in Park Slope. And so they were struggling with learning about communities of where they could go outside the city. So helped to create this, this event to bring in experts from outside the city so that people in Brooklyn and in New York City could learn more about the suburbs without having to spend every weekend traveling around trying to figure it out for themselves. So tonight we have 3 different areas that we're going to cover. We've got Essex County, New Jersey. It's actually a little bit larger area than Essex, but Essex is one of the more popular destinations. And Ginge Calhoun is going to speak to you about that. We've got Alana Benjamin coming from Port Washington, Long Island, and I'm going to let these guys do a little intro when it's their chance to give you some info. Alana is coming from Port Washington, Long Island, which is another popular spot. And Lindsay Rothman and Maya Sheehan are coming from Westchester, which is obviously big territory, and they're going to talk a little bit about some of the most popular spots there. We definitely want to hear from all of you who are here to learn. If you have questions, throw them in the chat. We're going to try to answer as many as we can. If we don't get to your question, we will make sure that we can connect with you afterwards. I am doing this from my house in Park Slope, Brooklyn. My partner, Brad Bateman, we're part of the Bateman Fields team. We represent real estate transactions here in Brooklyn. So we know a lot about the Brooklyn market and kind of the greater New York City market. So we're going to touch a little bit on that because some people are in a position where they have to sell to buy. And so they need to understand the process and all of that. And maybe you're not really quite ready to explore the suburbs and you want to understand what you could get here versus what you could get out in the suburbs. So,
and I just want to chime in really quickly as well. I'm Brad Bateman, everyone, Jessica's partner here in Brooklyn, and we've carefully curated some of the best agents in the surrounding areas because we really want them to give you the broadest and best understanding of what the culture and the community and the real estate market is like in those areas. But we also wanted to introduce you to these agents because it really is your best way to learn about these different areas is to connect with them. Every transaction in every area is different and requires a lot of local knowledge. And I actually had a very exciting thing happen in where after doing this for many years at Beyond Brooklyn, I actually used one of our Beyond Brooklyn connections in the Hudson Valley to look for and purchase a second home. And I just went fully into contract tonight. The sellers just signed. So Beyond Brooklyn worked for one of the members here on the team, which is really, really cool. And I will say, as an experienced agent here in Brooklyn, I was totally out of my depth and totally out of my league up in Westchester. I did not know I needed a radon test. I did not know I needed a septic inspection. I didn't know anything about anything. And without the guidance of this amazing Compass agent up in the Hudson Valley, I would have been totally lost. And it was a very hyper competitive market up there. There were 20 offers on the house I bid on, and we came out on top because of her guidance. So after the call, if you gravitate towards one of the areas, do reach out, do connect to these agents. They are your local experts, and it's 1000% more effective and more helpful than scrolling around on Zoom or on Zillow at night, trying to figure out what kind of listings there are. Talk to these people after you have the talk tonight, and you'll learn so much more. It's really amazing.
All right, well, so without further ado, I want to introduce everybody to Ginge Calhoun, who is here from New Jersey. And I'm going to let her pop in and do a little intro, and then we'll start grilling her with a bunch of questions.
Oh, great. First up, I better make it good so everyone remembers. So I'm Ginge Calhoun, as Brad and Jessica said. I work on the Allison ZFIT team, and we're primarily based out of Essex, Morris, and Union County. So popular towns that people move here to be in is Montclair, Milburn, Short Hills, Summit, Maplewood, South Orange, West Orange, Bloomfield, all different price points, which I know we'll touch on later. And a lot of people move because they want to be near the city so they can commute ideally within around 45 minutes and also be able to buy a home and have a suburban feel. I actually moved here, it will be 6 years ago, and I lived on the Upper East Side for almost 2 years before that in LA. And you've probably gathered for many years before that, I lived in England. And so I know what it's like to make a long distance move. I think I saw somebody is on this call from Florida. We do help a number of clients make very long distance moves and then also shorter distances. So we helped 80 plus families last year, and I think 6 or 7 of them were Beyond Brooklyn clients. So we do a lot with these guys and also with the other agents on the call too, referring clients out to them. So we're glad you're all here.
So Ginge, why don't you give us a bit of a picture of what your communities look like that Essex County and surrounding counties as well. Are there notable things about the architecture, about what people do for fun in those communities?
Gosh, listen to this.
Yes, so people typically when they come out here, they do find there is a lot to fill their time. I know for some it's really hard to leave the city, especially when you have your bagel shop and the places you like to go on the weekend and parks, but we do have pretty good breakfast. We have wonderful parks. We have the South Mountain Reservation. We also have the West Orange Reservoir. So a lot of people find outdoor activities. We're only, some we get to beaches 20-30 minutes. We're not far from Asbury Park when it's nice and sunny. Hard to imagine today. There's also a lot of performing arts. So we have the Mayor Performing Arts Center in Morristown. We have the South Orange Performing Arts Center. We also have Paper Mill Playhouse. So there's a lot going on from that side of things. And also a lot of these people that move to these towns, you'll find them in drama, theatre, music production, as well as a mix of people also within banking and finance. So there's a real kind of complexity to different careers of people that move out here. What else? There's a lot of activities for kids. I'm going to pretend that we're not still in COVID. So we have a lot of outdoor, especially in summer, we have South Orange movie nights. There's community swimming pools. So there is a lot going on and a lot of ways to really meet people. And if you don't know people in this area, especially when you go to some of these events, you'll find families or friends. You don't have to have kids to move here. We have a lot of people that also move here without kids, and they really enjoy what our towns have to offer.
I know from conversations that we've had in the past that the arts are just such a strong element to that area. And there's a lot of well-known people in the arts that move out to Montclair and surrounding towns. And the event spaces and stuff, there's great performers and that come through, especially in Newark too.
Yeah, for sure. And I also should mention, we have Maple Woodstock, which hopefully will be back this year. Typically we have the Montclair Jazz Festival. We normally host New Jersey Pride, is normally held in Maplewood too. So there's a lot kind of going on around that. And Jessica too, you asked about houses. We have a bunch of different styles of architecture, which does draw people in terms of just the look and feel of the different houses and neighborhoods and communities out here as well.
Yeah,
I went and visited friends in Maplewood who live there, and they absolutely love it. We were there for a July 4th celebration down in there was a big field, and there were hundreds and hundreds of families and food trucks and fireworks and just so much fun. And then walking back to the houses through the neighborhood, you could really see the variety of architecture that they have on display. And it was really just a wonderful community vibe and a lot of charm in the area as well. So I really loved it. And my friends who live there, like, they can't stop talking about it.
One of the nice things is that these guys can connect you with other people that have made the move. We've certainly got a big network of people who have moved from the city out to the suburbs, and what's nice is that they can give you their 2 cents about how that transition has gone, and if there's anything that they really feel like they're missing from their city life. And I mean, the secret is that there really isn't. You know, they rarely come back and say, yes, we hate living here and we are missing all of, you know, the good food or the this or the that. They generally find that life is pretty comfortable. Let's talk about the housing a little bit more. Give us an idea of, you know, kind of an average 3 or 4 bedroom house. Like, what are people paying for a house like that? You know, what are the taxes?
Yeah, so we have, and these numbers I just pulled, these are our 2021 average sales prices, which have gone up on average around 10% from 2020 to 2021. So these markets, and we'll talk about this too, they do remain competitive, but we will get our clients in a position where they, you know, much like Brad, can come out on top of the pile of offers that come rolling in. So right now you're looking at, for kind of Bloomfield, around 450, West Orange around 515, Maplewood and South Orange are just in that kind of 760 to 800, and then Montclair is almost to $1 million now. It was about 800 and something the year before. So there's a real range, but I'd say really you're looking at least kind of 450, 500 for a 3 bedroom. Taxes are going to be anywhere from, I'd say, 14 to upwards of 32, depending on where you end up.
And one thing to note about taxes, which we're not going to cover in great detail here, all of the different towns that are covered, the taxes are somewhat similar, but what is unique in different towns and different areas, that the taxes will actually reset when the new sales price hits. And that's something that you really want to be aware of. If you're just looking at Zillow and you see the taxes, that might not actually be what the taxes are. So it really does help to connect with someone who knows kind of what the local situation is.
And they're calculated differently in different places too. So, you know, depending on how, you know, and again, this is where the experts come in, but between Westchester and Long Island, New Jersey, you know, they may be calculated differently. So, you know, may make more difference if you have more land or less land or a bigger house or a more renovated house, or so definitely that's a nuance that is in flux. But what we have found that is kind of consistent across the board is that sort of average 3 or 4 bedroom house has roughly comparable taxes as you move throughout these different places. So, you know, don't expect that there's a huge tax savings, maybe in Connecticut, but not in the areas that we're covering today. So let's talk a little bit about the market. I know you said it went up 10% in kind of year over year. Are you seeing the market being very vibrant right now? What kind of advice would you give somebody who is just entering into this equation?
So our market, and much like, and I don't want to steal everybody else's thunder, but similarly, I think with everyone, our markets have always been popular and therefore competitive. So the biggest thing really is making sure you know you're pre-approved. And again, consider different lenders. If you end up looking with Lindsay and Maya, they're going to have a lender they suggest. It behooves you to work with them from a competitive standpoint, but knowing what you can spend and also knowing what you're comfortable with in terms of, if a house is listed for X, how much am I willing to offer over that? Because typically that is going to be what you need to be thinking about. And really, you know, when you're really ready to start looking, it's about knowing those towns and those communities. So coming out, driving around, just getting a feel for neighborhoods, which streets do you like, which areas look great. You know, do you want to be in Montclair, which has 5 train stations and is a little bigger, or do you want to be somewhere smaller like Maplewood? Or are you content in West Orange where there is no train, but the prices are a little lower? So figuring out those pieces, and all of us on these teams and groups can help you, give you tools to really get started in that before you start diving into, let's just go and see a bunch of houses.
Yeah, that's great advice, certainly.
Yeah.
Are you finding that it takes people a few kind of go arounds to get the house of their dreams, kind of put a few offers in, learn from the experience?
I do, because it is like that. And I think sometimes the first offer is the hardest, because some people, like Brad said, it's different everywhere you go. And even if you bought a house somewhere, it's just different. And Northern New Jersey has this period called attorney review. So even just that first step of making an offer and having the conversations around, if it's listed for X, where do I need to be? What are the comparative sales like? What are the tools that I can utilize to make my offer really strong? I think it takes people at least one or two offers typically before they're really comfortable and they're like, okay, we see this. Sometimes you have to be in it to really get it.
And to speak to personal experience, I lost out on 2 properties using the Beyond Brooklyn agent Kelsey before. I decided that the only thing I had to do was go non-contingent on financing and bet 20% over the asking price. And it's just what you had to do.
Yeah. I just bid on a house today, actually, and came second out of 6, and it tickles. So I really feel for what our buyers, more so than ever, I think, what you go through going through these offers.
There's something about it tickling that I really like.
That was not the word I used.
So one question that came up in the chat, which is, we get this question a lot, is towns that are walkable, coming from the city, people really love the walkability. Are there particular towns that you would focus on if that was a priority?
So I do get it, having lived on the Upper East Side, and the stroller, the pram was it was the thing. And when we moved here, just putting kid in a car seat to go somewhere just seemed crazy. You get used to it very quickly. And even if you are walkable, I will say many people will take to driving quite quickly. It is not fun when it's 20 degrees outside. That being said, much like, we talked about house prices, the closer that you get to town or to a village, the price of the house is going to go up, because typically those houses are bigger, they're more sought after because they're closer to the train station, to the village. Maplewood and South Orange are smaller in terms of, just their geographic area, that a lot of people kind of gravitate towards that. Some people really enjoy Montclair because it's a much bigger town, as I mentioned, and they don't mind the fact that maybe it's a little bit of a longer walk, or they'll be really close to one of the stations. Same thing with Summit in Melbourne. There are some beautiful homes close to the station. So you can most of the towns you're going to be walkable, unless you pick somewhere like West Orange, for example, that doesn't have its own train station, where there is no real set downtown or village. But sometimes people find a slightly bigger house there and they get a little bit more for their money.
One thing that I just want to mention really quickly too is that a lot of people don't think about this. Sometimes some of these deals are done off market, especially in COVID. There was more opportunity for those because people didn't want a lot of people coming through their houses. More often than not, properties are coming to market because there are competitive bid situations. But I know for a fact that Ginge has helped one of our clients from Brooklyn purchase an off-market deal that was really helpful. And actually, Ginge referred a client here in Brooklyn that we are currently doing an off-market deal as well. So those do exist. It is another benefit of connecting with a local agent. So I just wanted to mention that. Some people here have asked some questions about schools and about diversity. That does come into some problematic issues with fair housing. Just there are some rules and laws that require us to be a little bit conscious about those certain topics. So we can connect you with a lot of local resources. We can also connect you with various families that have moved to these towns. And you can have a direct conversation that is totally candid about schools. And one thing to note too is not all of the schools, the ranking systems are really reflective of how good the schools typically are. So it's better to dive down a little bit deeper with parents who send their kids to those schools, because sometimes those schools don't, take into account testing or diversity or other aspects which may, positively or negatively impact your children.
Absolutely. Well, so I want to make sure that we leave time for all of our other neighborhoods, but we may circle back to you with some future questions, Ginge.
Thank you.
So let's move on to Alana in Long Island. Alana, why don't you give us a bit of an intro and tell us about yourself a bit.
Hi, everybody. Alana Benjamin. I lived in the city, or I lived in Brooklyn for, God, I'm not going to tell you when, because it's going to make me sound old. When you could buy a brownstone like a lot cheaper. And before Brooklyn was the coolest place. So I lived in Brooklyn for many years, or about 4 years, and then I lived in the city for like 15 years. And then I moved out here about 7 years ago. I have 3 kids, and I lived in the city as long as I could until I just felt like I couldn't take it anymore. I was dragging my kids to the park and sweating all the time, and just was like, I can't do this anymore. So I live in Port Washington. I cover now pretty much all of Long Island, but I do a lot in Port Washington. My team has grown. All the areas in Long Island, just like in all these other towns, are very different and all have their own vibe. I love Port Washington. I grew up here, but the waterfront is a really important thing for me. And that's kind of why I came back here. And also the commute was excellent. And so I survived living out in the burbs, and I still eat good food, and I'm able to do all the things. And you'll find in all these towns that, it's all people who are moving from Brooklyn, moving from the city. So all the stuff that you have is really going to be there. So that's kind of I find that very comforting to people when they come out. And usually I start out, and I'm sure all the other agents do as well, as we start out with a tour, like really broadly, of each area, and then kind of figure out like what works for you and if you like the vibe and everything like that. So that was like a little about me and everything in between. I feel like, Jessica.
Well, so Alana, tell us a little bit about kind of the greater Port Washington area and like what makes it unique and different and special.
So Port Washington, and to quote Jessica Fields, who came a couple of years, you were here a couple of years, I feel like it was pre-COVID. I don't know. I feel like the COVID years have all blurred together, but Jessica said, when I come to Port Washington, I feel like I'm on vacation. And we are on the North Shore, we are on the water, we have beautiful sunsets. People come here, Port's a very big feeder from Brooklyn, from the city, because of the commute is excellent. It's 36 minutes on the train. We have the water, so we have a lot of waterfront. In the summer, you can, we have like a whole little area on the town dock. We have an organic farmers market where you can sit and get your ice cream and watch the sunset, and we have concerts and things on the park, and everything is really like outdoors, and lots of little beaches, and some of the areas, so a lot of the neighborhoods have like private beaches and areas like that, and we also have public beaches. So it's got that kind of like vacation-y, beachy vibe, but still really close access to the city. And Port Washington is on the Port Washington train line, which is its own train line to the city. So it's Port Planum, Manhasset, Great Neck, and then you head right into Penn Station. So that's what makes Port Washington unique. Really, the beauty of it. It feels a little, we call it sort of like exurban. It's not so suburban, and similar to the other areas, we have a bunch of different walkable like downtown areas where people can go and walk to.
What's nice about that too, being the first train line, is that you get a seat every time you get on the train.
You get a seat when you get on the train. You can snooze, and then when you get on the train in Penn, you can just snooze or do whatever. But yeah, the train is very easy, and it's very quick, and it runs very, at least from Port Washington, it runs quite frequently, because there are so many commuters in our town. And even on the weekend, it's like every half an hour. It's very, very often people are always going to the city. Every weekend, I feel like everyone's goes in, they go to shows. Like, I mean, not me, because I don't really do that much, but that's because I have 3 kids and I'm tired.
Well, I grew up on the North Shore of Long Island as well, and I can definitely attest to the fact that the water is such a huge draw to that environment, to that community. There's so much activity going along the waterfront, the access to the beaches, to the boats, to the fishing. It gives it a really, as Alana said, a really beachy, vacation-y vibe. And it's a really nice place to grow up as a kid from my personal experience.
Kind of touching on the sort of walkability question again, I'll ask: is Port Washington a walkable community? Are there communities that you would recommend in that area if that was an important criteria for you?
So walkability, it's similar to, you know, what Ginger was saying. There are several neighborhoods that are very walkable to town and to the train. So if that's what people want to focus on, you definitely can do that. And there are some where, you know, I live about a mile from the train and through town, and you know, I drive by and my neighbors are always, you know, walking and they're going into town. So yes, there are definitely people who want that walkability. That I would say that sometimes I'll get somebody who'll say like, oh, I'm not going to have a car. I'm like, well, you really need a car. But I do have families that come out and they have one car because they do manage to walk quite a bit. You'll still need your car, but there definitely are neighborhoods. I would say Port Washington, Manhasset, you can find a bunch of neighborhoods that are very walkable. That those will have like the best commutes in terms of the quickest. And then if you go a little further out, you can have some towns that are close, like neighborhoods. I'm sorry, here's someone screaming my name. It's like I'm hiding in the basement. There's some other towns like Seacliff, which is a super cute walkable town with a bunch of different neighborhoods that are and houses beautiful like old Victorians that are around it, but not as good of a commute. So there are like pockets, and then you can go like, it depends on the vibe that you're looking for, but yes, you can find that. And Port Washington, I would say that's why most people do, you know, gravitate, because of the walkability and the fact that like they feel like they have that. There are some towns in Long Island and, you know, all over that don't have that like nucleus of the town and that pulls it all together. And Port Washington is great because you have the train in the middle and like everything kind of like feeds off of it, and then also down to the water is another like feeder of where people will want to live and be close to.
So what in terms of pricing, house pricing, what are you seeing for like an average 3 or 4 bedroom house in these communities?
Yeah, the prices are up similarly. That I'd say, I mean, I work with people in every budget, you know, sometimes, you know, I'd say like it's probably around 9 to $1 million right now. That being said, like there are houses, you know, in the 8s. It's just the prices have risen really because the inventory is just very low. And so there's just a lot of competition for not that many houses, but I think more will be coming. I hope.
Mm-hmm.
I know like I'll have some listings. I say people don't be afraid, but yeah, around like in the 850 to 900, hovering around that million. I mean, you can really go, you could definitely go lower and you can definitely go way higher. But you know, most people I find like, you know, 3 bedrooms a little easier to find in Port than the 4 bedroom. It can be a little more challenging because just, I don't know, that's just how kind of, but it depends how close you are to the train. Also, if you're willing to be a little bit, when I say farther, I mean like 8 minutes drive. If you're a little farther, then you're going to get a little more bang for your buck. But yeah, around like 900. It used to be lower, more like 850. But
and what are you sensing in terms of the market now that it's, you know, we're starting to enter into what would typically be a busier
Spring.
market?
Yeah.
Is inventory starting to improve? Or are you starting to see more stuff come on the market?
Yeah, I mean, more stuff. I know of stuff coming, and because all the local brokers, we all talk about what's coming on. So there definitely stuff coming. I hope it's enough to satisfy the demand, but you know, there's always strategies, you know, that we can use to sort of make you stand out and, you know, make your offer stand out. But the best thing that you can do really, if you're starting to look and you want to get in, a lot of people want to come in for the summer or for the school year. So really kind of start, I say to people like, let's start right now. I'll give you a tour. I'll show you the neighborhoods. I'll show you what's sold, what prices. And then once I kind of show people like this is sold, that's sold, and their price point, they feel like, okay, like I'm going to find a house. Like until you see the houses and you see what's gone in your price point and things that you would have bought or that somebody would have bought, you kind of don't know like you can't really identify and say, like, people kind of get overwhelmed and they think, oh, I'm not going to find anything, but we will find. I really haven't like left anyone homeless.
Take some time.
No,
You need to
no.
educate yourself on the market.
No family left behind.
I mean, we find, and I know that we've talked about this before, that it can take 3 or 4 months, you know, of really active house hunting to end up finding that home, you know, and you have to be open-minded, you know, if you're looking for the needle in the haystack, 4 months you might need 4 years.
Right.
But you know, if you're looking for something that's a reasonable, you know, within your budget, you know, 3 or 4 months might be a reasonable time to imagine that it would take. So, you know, for anybody that's starting to think about this process now, and we'll talk about kind of the nuts and bolts as well as we get kind of towards the end. But yeah, I mean, leave yourself plenty of time, because that's maybe 4 months until you find the home. And then there's the part where you actually have to go through the process of buying the home. So,
Right.
you know, that could take, you know, 6 months or more. So if you're thinking about trying to move, let's say, before the start of a school year, this is a perfect moment to be starting your exploration.
Yeah. It's a perfect moment. Also, you know, I like what Ginge said about like pretending there's no COVID. I think now in the spring, I hope we're going to be having more activities and things that I try to tell people, like, there are activities that you can come to in the community and you can kind of get a sense of what the neighborhoods are like, and you can meet the people. There's going to be like, you know, spring fests and things like that, and outdoor festivals. And we have a lovely preserve that people go to here that you can, you know, even if you just want to go for a concert or things like that. So I always would recommend taking a tour, seeing the vibe. And Long Island, I think it's similar to these other areas in that every town has a really different vibe. And so what we try to do is match, like, what are you looking for? And as Brad said, like, some people will call me and say, like, I only want like this district because of the school is number one. And I say, well, wait, like, you can't just look at the schools and look at the numbers. You have to like think about your kid. I don't know. There's a lot more. I mean, obviously there's things we can't say about schools, but I connect them to local parents, and then they can kind of go on that route. But it's definitely the kind of thing you need to explore. You know, Port has a very beachy, kind of very laid back, but there's other towns that are, you know, that are a little bit different, and they have a different vibe, and the culture is different. So
How do people get to meet other people in your town? I know it's a question that we try to ask from time to time.
So obviously if you know, school is one way, it's a great way. Now it's a little harder because they don't really, you know, we can't get in as much, but for people with little kids in Port, we have a parent co-op, which is amazing. So it's called the Parent Resource Center. They have all kinds of like parent university and parent programs and classes for kids and things like that. Other things are like, you know, we have programs like at the Landmark that'll have like, you know, concerts or things like that, or even like at the Sands Point Preserve, they'll have like nature walks, and pretty much anything you're doing, like, you know, people are very friendly. Like I've met friends when I first got here. One of my really good friends, I met her at the shoe store, my friend Michelle. But I did meet a lot of people like sort of out and about, at the farmer's market. You always kind of see the same people. People have like running clubs. There's lots of little, also on Facebook, like lots of parent groups and resident groups, and people are, you know, contributing to different things. Basically any kind of cause you want to get into, if you want to help, like we have this local environmental group, so people will meet up with there. Like it just kind of depends on what you're into. You want to be like a kayaker, you know, there's the kayak people, there's, you know, it kind of just depends on what you're into. And pretty much like if you start something in Port, like if you said, oh, I want to create a group and I want to like my neighbor up the street has this whole, like, I do not do this, but she started this whole group where they like knit these things where these hands that go around trees, and she has all these people. I can't knit for, you know, I was going to say a word that rhymes with knit, but I'm not going to say it on the Zoom. I can't rhyme. I can't knit, but like that's something that she just thought of in her head. And now she has like all these people helping her knit these yarn arms that these like little hands. It's very cute, but that's just one example of like one thing that somebody's doing. You really can kind of go crazy.
Well, I think knit hands surrounding trees might be our perfect segue.
Right. Like a hugging tree.
The tree
Shut it
huggers. We'll move to Westchester and we'll talk to the tree huggers.
All our taxes.
Oh, sorry, we got somebody off. Sorry, I'm just gonna make sure that we're all muted. Thanks, Alana. I really appreciate your insight, and we may again have more questions. But I do want to move on to Westchester and give a chance to Maya and Lindsay to tell us a little bit about what it's like to live there and all their tree hugger ways. So why don't you guys do a little intro and tell us how you ended up there, and then we'll pepper with you with questions.
Okay, I will start. I think I did the same exact thing that most people did here. I had to move to Manhattan immediately upon graduating college. I didn't have a job yet. And I was there for a while. And after a few years and starting, real life and having a husband and pregnant with my child, my first son, we moved up here to Westchester and have been in this area for almost 9 years.
Yeah. And I'm Maya, and I actually grew up. I grew up in Westchester. I left Westchester for college, traveled around all over the world, ended up in Brooklyn before moving here. Absolutely loved it. And after being there for about 7 years, and when my kids I had 2 kids there, and I was sort of kicking and screaming. I was not ready to leave. My husband is from Oklahoma and wanted space and a yard and all of the things. But really the pushing factor for us was my daughter was starting kindergarten, and the whole school situation in New York City sort of scared me. So we moved to Westchester, and I've been here for about 4 years ever since.
Her story is so much more fun than mine. I mean, we couldn't figure out, we had a great apartment and couldn't figure out where we would keep the stroller, because it was a duplex, but it was a 6-floor walk up. So then we were like, all right, we quit. So that was
Well,
Totally
I mean,
understandable.
that's a classic problem in Brooklyn when we have clients who have strollers. Like, that's one of our key things that we look for is stroller parking. Can they park the stroller in the lobby of the building? All right, well, so why don't you give us a little description about why you think people are moving to Westchester? What are the things that make it special and different from some of these other areas?
I think that one thing that makes it special and very different from these other areas is that it's just a huge amount of geography. I mean, we have 19 towns and 23 villages in Westchester, none of which are the same. They offer everything from being, surrounded by nature, being close to the Hudson River, being on the Sound, or you can go further north and you can, be next door to a million horses. So it really kind of has something for everyone. And it gives you an opportunity to figure out what's most important to you and to your family, whether it's having a super quick commute or really having that sense of peace and quiet when you're home. The ability to walk outside naked and look around and no one's there. Like we have that in Westchester if you're interested. So, but it just really has everything, which makes it a great place, but also kind of difficult to navigate when you're looking for a house.
Well, one of the things that's great too about Lindsay and Maya's team is they've created a team called the Suburban Collective, which really does span the length of Westchester because it really is so diverse. You have the river towns, you have things on Long Island Sound and everything in between. So having a phone call with Lindsay and Maya and connecting with one of their teammates who can best help you identify the town that's probably going to be your cultural vibe is going to be really important. Because I do remember that when Lindsay, for example, first moved to Westchester, she did it blind and landed in a town that wasn't a good fit for her, and she learned the hard way. And she could actually help you not learn the hard way.
Yeah, that was quite. I mean, it was fine. Everything ended up fine. It wasn't like a nightmare, but it just wasn't my vibe, and I had no idea.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we love is the sort of the matchmaking that we do with you know, getting to know these clients and getting to know their families intimately, and really, you know, just kind of helping them explore and trying to find not just the right house, but the right town and the right community and the right vibe for them. It's, you know, that's sort of what we love the most about our jobs.
Give us a sense about housing prices and what the market is like, and particularly taxes, because people associate high taxes with Westchester.
So I mean, I similar to, there's kind of a lid to every pot in Westchester. I do think that there is an opportunity to purchase a home in Westchester in any price point. So I'm going to give you some sort of averages, but you know, what I always tell people is these are averages, but, you know, depending on your flexibility in certain things, there is going to be an opportunity for you. So some of the things that we always tell people is, you know, the further north you get, the more kind of buying power you generally have in Westchester. And the further away you get from a train station, that gives you a little bit more buying power. You know, renovated versus move-in ready, all of these things. So, you know, some of the numbers kind of scare people off, but really there are opportunities, you know, in any price point, and there are, you know, there's deals to be had, believe it or not. So I would say in Westchester overall, the average price point for last year was $780,000. In the river towns, it's about $850,000. Some of the other areas that we cover are a little bit higher in price point. So if you go into Scarsdale and Mamaroneck, you're closer to like 1.7, 1.8 million is the average price point. So obviously those prices are a lot higher. You know, if you go a little further up into Chappaqua, which we do a lot of business there, it's closer to 900 to $1 million up there. But again, there's something for everyone. There's areas, you know, Bronxville, your average is 2.5 million. But, you know, there's other areas where if you go a little further north, Rhinebeck was something like, you know, 600,000. So there really is a little bit for everybody, but that kind of gives you a general sense for what you can get.
I think for the taxes situation,
Taxes, yeah.
I think there's different towns and different vibes, which I'll have you speak to as well, but consider it in conjunction with what the costs are here in Brooklyn. So for instance, I own a brownstone here in Brooklyn. My taxes are $3,000 per year, but I send my kid, my 3.5-year-old, to a, you know, $30,000 a year private school around here, and I have a nanny because I can't leave the kid at home. So like I'm paying way more here than I would if I was in the suburbs, but it really does even out when you consider things like train costs, cars, you know, all the different costs. It really is a question of what lifestyle do you want? That's the real important question here. The money is going to essentially wash out between the price of the house, the taxes, you know, the commute, the car, all the school being free. So think and find first, I think, would be where do you feel most comfortable and where is your vibe? Someone asked a question. I live in Bed-Stuy and my taxes are $3,000 per year. That is common out here. And I have a 2-family house. So if you have a tenant, it can offset the cost of these very expensive houses, but then you have to figure out about schooling. Anyway, back to you guys with the taxes.
Well, you're right. What was that?
I was just going to chime in. I think Brad made a very good point, which, you know, is a lot of people start this journey thinking that they're going to save a lot of money by moving to the suburbs. And I think in the end, it becomes kind of a wash. And what you're doing is you're finding new lifestyle. So I think if you're of the mindset that it's going to be a bargain, you know, you might save money on the house purchase, but you might be spending more money in other ways. So just something to kind of keep in mind, not to be Debbie Downer, but.
No, I mean, it's a good point. And, you know, I think a lot of people do move here because of that, you know, what Brad, you know, pointed out, that he has one child that's going to private school. So when you have, you know, 2, 3, like Alana, you know, or more, then it really quickly adds up. And I think that's maybe when you save a little bit of money, because, you know, we have some of the best schools in the state and some of the best in the country. So you can, you know, close your eyes and kind of throw a dart at the map of Westchester and you're going to be okay, no matter where you go. And the taxes, a large majority of those taxes are paid for the schools. So it's like, we pay more, but at least we're paying for, nice books and, awesome programs.
How do you find that people make their friends and meet other people? I mean, this is a great question just with COVID, and I know that it's obviously different because of COVID than maybe in normal times.
I mean, I honestly think I'm meeting friends in the same way that I did in Brooklyn. I think you meet friends, through school and things like that, but there's lots of, restaurants and bars, and Lindsay and I love to still kind of live the same sort of lifestyle here in the burbs that we did in the city. And, there's lots of great events. A lot of the towns have, great farmers markets and great events. We love to go to jazz nights at Lyndhurst and in Irvington, where everyone kind of brings out their blankets and brings their bottles of wine. And there's always a jazz concert every week. So there's sort of an unlimited way to meet people, not just, okay, I meet my friends through my kids' school. I think there's a lot of other opportunities, and, in the same way that you would meet people in the city.
Yeah, but I think the big difference is that in the city, when I would meet someone, and then we only lived 3 blocks away, but I would always be going downstairs to get my egg sandwich from this one bodega, and they're going to one just 3 blocks away, and I just never saw them. Here, just organically, you're bumping into people more often because let's face it, there are not 10 different choices for grocery stores in each town. I'm going to be realistic with everyone. I mean, maybe in a few, but not in most. So you're going to just see the people over and over again. Not to the point where it's annoying and you can't hide, but where it's like you don't have to awkwardly go out of your way to want to seek this person out. And it's just organic, I guess.
I love that. Well, so let's talk a little bit like nuts and bolts about just the process of how do people start this all off? I know we talked about the pre-approval letter. That's kind of true across the board with any community, whether it be Brooklyn or New Jersey or Long Island, Westchester. That's really your first step with, understanding how much you can afford to spend. And that pre-approval letter, you'll no doubt need to have it in hand to submit an offer on anything. So before you go shopping, that's the first step. Depending on where you're curious about looking, you may choose a lender that is more appropriate for a different area. So the lender for Brooklyn may not be the same lender for Long Island, let's say. So good to have a conversation with somebody. And as you pivot to your search at all, you may need to go get pre-approved again with a different lender. So that's kind of like step number 1. Step number 2 is obviously having communication with, any of these guys that, are coming from an area that you're looking at. Like Brad said, Zillow is really tempting. I have certainly done it way too much myself. Every time I go on vacation, I Zillow to see what the houses cost wherever I am. It's a sickness that we probably all have as real estate agents. So, I would say that's helpful to get an overview, but when you actually want the real information, Zillow just really can't get it to you. In fact, I looked for myself for a long time at homes in New Jersey, and I can safely say that none of the tax information on Zillow was ever accurate. So, just the basic information is not even correct. So something to keep in mind. And make sure to find an expert to take you down that road. We love these guys. We've spent a lot of time vetting agents from all over the place, and think that you're starting off having we've done all the hard work for you to find the right people. So that saved you a whole bunch of time and effort right there.
And having just done it myself, I cannot speak of how important it is to have somebody who's on the ground, who has boots on the ground, who knows what the local situation is. I mean, my agent up in the Hudson Valley right now was calling the local tax guy who did her a favor and gave her an estimate of what he thought my taxes would be. There's no way that Zillow was ever going to do that. So one thing to keep in mind too is no question is silly. No question is too small. And it's never too early to start. You might say, well, we're dreaming about doing this in 2 years. Have the conversation now. reach out, shoot an email to any of these people. We'll connect you afterwards, either tonight or tomorrow. You'll see an email from all of us. And really, just start a conversation and see where it leads. They're the perfect person to go have a coffee with in their hometown and get a sense of the vibe, see how walkable it is. They can connect you to some of their people who maybe relocated from different towns to that area, so you can get a sense of that. And the other thing that's really important too is some of you may have properties here in Brooklyn, and it's really helpful to know what your property is valued at here if you are going to be making the move. Because one of the things that we really love about this Beyond Brooklyn brand that we've built is we see your move as a holistic thing, as one whole move, whereas most agents see it as a transaction. I'm selling your home or you're buying a home. We see it as an end-to-end service, so that whether you're selling here and moving there or renting here and moving there, that you are taken care of every step of the way. And I can't even tell you how many transactions and moves we've helped facilitate from Brooklyn and New York all the way to one of these other neighborhoods. And we stay in constant communication with all of the agents that are here together. We're all friends. We, even before COVID, during COVID, we meet up. We know who you guys are. We know your stories. I mean, before the Zoom started tonight, Ginge was asking me about a client she sent. So we get it. We understand what you're going through, and we've done it ourselves, and want to help you do it from this end to that end.
Yeah, and one thing that is kind of part of that, what Brad was saying about getting a valuation on your home is, that really comes into play when you go and you speak with a lender, right? So they're going to want to know what your assets are, and if you're not quite sure what the value of your home is here, and the market is moving very fast in Brooklyn, just like it's moving fast in some of these other places. If you thought that your home was worth something last year, there's a good chance it's worth more today. So having some real insight into the value of your home. And if you're still not sure that you want to move, we certainly can talk you through what is realistic in our market here. And, if you're thinking about upsizing, but you're not ready to move or anything like that, considering other neighborhoods, where can you find the space that you need and stay within the New York City bounds? It's something that we can certainly talk about and give you realistic expectations about what you can get for your money, what your home is worth. We want to make the process easy for you and make sure that you don't have to move multiple times when you really only want to move once, and get the most bang for your buck out of whatever you have here to sell, and try to get you the best deal on the other end too. So like Brad said, it's a holistic package here. Any other questions in the chat, or we have like a couple more minutes left here. We want to make sure that we get everybody's questions answered. But a lot of newer constructions options in northern New Jersey. Are you seeing, actually, it's a good question kind of across the board. Are you guys seeing a lot of building happening because the market is so vibrant? Are you seeing, housing come up?
It depends on the towns. In the towns that we cover, certain ones lend themselves more to new construction. So Summit, Short Hills, there tends to be newer construction in those towns versus Maplewood and Montclair. We had one new build in Maplewood the other week that was listed at 1.2, and I'm pretty sure is going over 1.5, because it's just so rare to have a totally new construction home in these towns. But they're out there, but it's not a prolific amount for us here in northern New Jersey. I'm not sure about the other ladies.
What about you guys in Westchester? Are you seeing a lot of new development there?
Yep. I mean, it depends on the area.
Yeah, it's the same. I think there are certain areas where it's much more common, and certain areas where it's sort of impossible to find a new construction. You'd have to sort of tear a house down to start from scratch. But it really depends on the area.
Yeah, not some of the river towns, a lot in Rye, I would say, barely any in Bronxville. Further north, where you have more land, you'll see a lot more.
Okay. Let's see, thoughts on buying. Okay, so actually that's buying homes that require work. I mean, this was always one of our big things about ways to get into an area for less money was to buy a house that needed some fixing up. I imagine that's still true. Are you seeing fixer-uppers on the market? Alana, why don't we direct that to you, but then we'll get it to the rest of you guys too.
Yeah, absolutely. There definitely are fixer-uppers, whether it's, kitchens and baths, and, for new construction, depending on where you are, at least, in Long Island, there are, some heavy tax implications for new construction and some question marks about the taxes, once you have a totally new house. So, you have to be prepared for that. But I always, tend to think that if you can find something with really good bones and that needs kitchens and baths, like as someone who just did a big addition, that's a lot simpler, especially with, now the supply chain, and there's a lot of, the price of building has gone up, lumber's more expensive and just everything's more complicated. So I do think that we are seeing lots of fixer-uppers, and, people are aging out of their homes and maybe haven't been renovating them. So absolutely.
Ginge, I'll move on to Ginge. Are you seeing that that's a great way, a bargain to get a fixer-upper, or are they still going fast and furious?
Not a bargain. I didn't say bargain.
I'd love to pretend there's a bargain.
There's no
If
bargain.
there was, I'd be buying it. There are no bargains. We had some last week, actually, a what we class as a fixer-upper went on for 5 something, and I think it got 15 offers and probably went over 700. So, and that again, like that could be $1 million house, but there isn't, and that I think had 10 end users and 8 investors bidding on it, I heard. So
but you have a different market. The prices in New Jersey that's why you kind of have to understand, because what Ginge is saying is she's saying something was at 500 and now it's at 7. That's the way their market is. That's not, we go over ask, but not like that. Like that's
right.
That's a whole different ballgame that you need Ginge for.
Well, it's definitely important to understand how to play the game in different markets, right? Because what works in Brooklyn isn't going to work in New Jersey or Long Island. Like there's just different strategies, and they have different, even just on the pricing side, what you're saying, Alana, is like, the seller's price aggressively low, understanding that the final price is going to be potentially, 10, 20% over where they start.
Yeah. And I will say, typically people are not pricing low here. In fact, there was even some listings last week that they were listed 4 months ago. I think there would have been a lower price, but it's just, Alana, I think said this, there is so little inventory. I think we've got less than a month right now for all the buyers looking, which makes it just that bit more challenging. And hopefully that will change before the mortgage rates go up too much.
And what about rentals? Are you guys seeing rentals come on the market? Do they get snapped up really fast?
Yes, and yes.
Absolutely.
In Westchester, do you guys get rentals?
We do, but they are a few and far between, I would say. It's not that easy. We get a lot of people who are like, oh, we just want to rent just to see, and we're like, okay, good luck. It's not that easy to find a rental in Westchester, I would say. Although again, that depends a little bit on the area as well. But it's not as easy as you think.
Well, yeah, and if you're okay with having an apartment,
right?
Which kind of, I feel like maybe defeats the purpose for many people moving to the area. But if you're okay with that, then it's a different story.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat about taxes, and we're gonna have to take it kind of offline, because I think that it's gonna be different kind of community by community how taxes get calculated with renovations and whatnot. But it's a great question, so appreciate that. But let's tackle that after the Zoom. I want to ask you guys kind of like one last question. So if you had to pick, and I know, Alana, this is going to be a little harder for you because we're focusing kind of mainly on a couple of key towns, but if you had to pick a couple of key towns in your communities that you see the bulk of people from New York City, and maybe even more specifically Brooklyn, moving to, what would those be? Ginge, you want to take it first?
Oh, you surprised us with that one.
I know, this is a new one. I'm pulling this out of nowhere.
most clients, when they're calling us, they are looking Montclair and Glenridge, South Orange, Maplewood, or potentially West Orange, Bloomfield.
Okay. Alana?
Port Washington, Manhasset. Those are kind of the big ones. And then sometimes we'll talk about Seacliff and Glen Head, and then sometimes we'll talk about Huntington, but that's usually too long for people from Brooklyn. It's too far. So Port Manhasset is sort of a stronghold, and then we kind of go from there.
Okay. Maya and Lindsay?
Once again, it kind of depends on how far or close the person wants to be to the city. But I mean, river towns historically, and still Larchmont, we're having a huge influx of people who want to move to Larchmont. And then people now that do not have the commute to the city at all are looking at like North Salem, South Salem. We can get a really good deal in South Salem, Katona, Beacon, you know, those areas, but that, you know, not optimal for commuting, in my opinion.
Okay, awesome. Well, we want to let everybody get back to their evenings and enjoy their relaxation time. So really appreciate everybody coming. Appreciate, you know, Ginge, Alana, Maya, Lindsay for taking the time out to give us information about your communities. Brad for chiming in and giving us some good anecdotes. And we would be happy to help you guys more offline. If you have really specific questions, please stay in touch. We're happy to answer anything. Look out for an email from us, either, like Brad said, either tonight or tomorrow, with ways in which we can you can connect back to us. And if you need more help, lenders, attorneys, we have a whole big stockpile of names that we can help share with you guys. Thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you guys for hosting. Thanks everyone for coming.
Guys.
Thank
Hi, guys.
you.
Nice to see you all.
Bye. Nice to see you. Oh, miss you guys.
Lindsay and Maya, I want to come to one of those jazz nights.
Oh, they
Oh my
really are
God.
amazing.
They're so much fun.
Was it Tuesday or Thursday? Thursday.
No, I think it's Tuesday.
It's amazing. We'll let you know.
Let us know. We're going to go out. We're going to New Jersey not too long from now to have lunch with Ginge and Allison. So you and Alana, you guys are on the hook for inviting us out.
Yeah.
Can we do like a
Oh.
caravan and just travel to each other?
That's a great idea.
Sure.
We can
Like,
accept that.
every time I'm on this, I'm like, I just said to her, I'm like, do you want to buy a summer house in Port Washington together? Gets me every time.
I know a good
I
broker
want to
out
buy
there.
a ski house. That's my next. I really want to buy a ski condo.
Kelsey, talk to Kelsey.
By the way, guys, Kelsey is amazing. I just used her myself.
Where'd you buy a house?
Outside the town of Hudson in a little town called Philmont.